The stagecoach lurched over another rut in the dusty Texas road, and Delilah Norton pressed her hand against the worn leather seat to steady herself, her heart hammering, not from the rough journey, but from the cold eyes of the guard seated across from her who had been staring at her jewelry case for the past 2 hours. She had boarded the coach in San Antonio 3 days ago in the spring of 1876, heading back to her family ranch outside Bandera after settling her late aunt's estate, and the guard assigned to protect the passengers had made her skin crawl from the moment she saw him whispering with 2 rough-looking men at the last relay station. The other passengers, an elderly couple and a traveling merchant, dozed fitfully in the afternoon heat, oblivious to the tension coiling in Delilah's stomach. She was 22 years old, capable and ranch-raised, but she knew danger when she saw it. The guard, a wiry man with tobacco-stained teeth and a scar running down his left cheek, kept fingering the rifle across his knees while his gaze drifted between her face and the small leather case tucked beside her that contained her aunt's emerald necklace and several gold pieces. At the next relay station, a ramshackle building surrounded by scraggly mesquite trees, Delilah made a decision. While the driver checked the horses and the other passengers stretched their legs, she approached the station master, an older man with kind eyes and sun-weathered skin. "Sir, I need help," she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder to ensure the guard was not within earshot. "The guard on our coach, I believe he means to rob us. I saw him talking with suspicious men at the last station, and he has been watching my belongings with intent I do not trust." The station master's expression grew grave. "That would be Cole Jennings. We have had our suspicions about him, but no proof. Your ranch is still a good 40 miles from here, through some lonely country. Is there anyone who could ride alongside the coach? Someone trustworthy?" The station master scratched his grizzled jaw, then his eyes lit up. "There is one man, a mountain man who lives up in the hills but comes through here for supplies. Name is Xavier Lawson. He is as honest as they come and tougher than a hickory stump. Happens he is here right now, trading some pelts." Delilah followed the station master's gesture to a figure standing near the corral, and her breath caught despite her worry. The man was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that strained against his buckskin shirt. His hair was dark brown and hung past his collar, sun-streaked and thick. Even from a distance she could see the powerful muscles of his arms as he examined a horse's hoof, the easy strength in every movement. A thick beard covered his jaw, and he wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. "Mr. Lawson," the station master called, and the mountain man straightened, turning toward them with the fluid grace of someone completely at home in his own body. As he approached, Delilah had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, which were a startling gray-green, like a storm rolling over the hills. His face was all hard planes and angles, weathered by sun and wind, with a strong nose and a mouth that looked like it did not smile often. He had to be in his late 20s, she guessed, and everything about him spoke of raw power held in careful check. "Xavier, this young lady has a problem," the station master said. "She is traveling on the afternoon coach to Bandera, and she believes the guard means her harm." Those gray-green eyes settled on Delilah with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and strangely safe. "What makes you think so, miss?" His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together, but not unkind. Delilah straightened her spine. "I saw him conspiring with 2 men at the last station, speaking in whispers and looking at the coach. He has been staring at my belongings since San Antonio, and there's something in his manner that frightens me. I do not scare easily, Mr. Lawson. I was raised on a ranch and can shoot as well as most men, but something in my gut tells me this man is dangerous." Xavier studied her for a long moment, and she had the sense he was measuring not just her words but her character. Finally, he nodded. "Your instincts are likely sound. Cole Jennings has a reputation, though nothing proven. If you are worried, then I will ride alongside until you reach home safely." "I can pay you," Delilah said quickly, but Xavier shook his head. "No payment needed. Cannot let a woman travel in danger when I can do something about it." Relief flooded through her, so strong her knees felt weak. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I'm Delilah Norton. My father owns the Norton Ranch outside Bandera." "Know the place? Good land." He touched the brim of his hat. "Give me 5 minutes to saddle my horse." Delilah watched him stride toward the stable, his movements economical and purposeful. The station master chuckled beside her. "That is the most words I have heard Xavier speak in a month. He is a solitary man, but good to his core. You will be safe with him watching over you." When the stagecoach rolled out 15 minutes later, Delilah felt infinitely better seeing Xavier mounted on a large buckskin gelding beside the coach. He sat the horse like he was part of it, a rifle resting casually across his saddle and his eyes constantly scanning the terrain. The guard, Cole Jennings, had scowled when he saw Xavier, his expression turning sour and suspicious. "What is he doing here?" Jennings demanded of the driver. "Extra protection," the driver said gruffly. "Owner's orders. There have been robberies on this route." Jennings subsided with ill grace, but Delilah noticed how his hand kept straying to his pistol and how his eyes followed Xavier with naked hostility. The mountain man seemed unbothered, keeping pace with the coach as they rolled through the Texas hill country, the landscape a mix of rocky outcroppings, oak trees, and endless sky. The sun was lowering toward the horizon when they entered a narrow canyon, the road winding between steep rocky walls dotted with cedar and scrub. Delilah's tension ratcheted up. This was perfect country for an ambush. She saw Xavier sit straighter in his saddle, his eyes sharp and alert. The attack came without warning. 3 riders burst from behind a jumble of boulders ahead, guns drawn and bandanas covering their faces. At the same moment, Cole Jennings stood up on the coach, his rifle swinging not toward the bandits, but toward the elderly couple. "Everybody stay calm, and you will not get hurt," Jennings shouted. "Throw down your valuables." But he had not counted on Xavier. The mountain man moved with startling speed, his rifle coming up in one smooth motion. The crack of gunfire echoed off the canyon walls as he shot the gun from Jennings's hand. The guard howled, clutching his bloodied fingers, and tumbled from the coach. The 3 bandits wheeled their horses toward Xavier, and Delilah's heart leaped into her throat. 1 against 3, plus the treacherous guard. But Xavier was already moving, spurring his buckskin forward with a shout that sent the stagecoach horses lunging ahead, away from danger. He fired again, and one of the bandits jerked and slumped in his saddle. The other 2 hesitated, clearly not expecting armed resistance. "Get down!" the merchant inside the coach screamed, and Delilah crouched low, but she pulled her own small pistol from her reticule, her father's training coming back. She leaned out the window and fired at the nearest bandit. Her shot went wide, but it was enough to spook his horse, which reared and sent him scrambling to stay mounted. Xavier used the distraction, closing the distance and slamming the butt of his rifle into another bandit's face. The man toppled from his horse with a sickening crunch. The last bandit, seeing his companions down and facing a mountain man who fought like a wildcat, decided discretion was the better part of valor. He wheeled his horse and fled back the way he had come. Cole Jennings, blood streaming from his mangled hand, tried to grab the reins of one of the riderless horses, but Xavier was there in an instant. He dismounted in one fluid motion and hauled the guard up by his shirt collar, holding him like he weighed nothing. "You picked the wrong coach to rob," Xavier growled, and there was something in his voice that made even Delilah shiver. He looked at the driver, who had managed to calm the panicked stage horses. "You have rope?" Within minutes, Cole Jennings was trussed up like a turkey, cursing and threatening. One of the bandits was dead, shot through the heart by Xavier's first defensive shot. The other was unconscious and also tied up. Xavier loaded them both into the coach's boot without apparent effort, his muscles flexing under his shirt. Delilah climbed out of the coach on shaking legs, her pistol still in her hand. Xavier turned to her, his eyes sweeping over her from head to toe. "You hurt?" "No, I'm fine, thank you. If you had not been here, we would all be robbed or worse. You did well firing when you did. Gave me the opening I needed." He nodded toward her pistol with something that might have been approval. "Most ladies would have fainted." "I'm not most ladies." For the first time, something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No, I suppose you are not." The rest of the journey to Bandera was tense but uneventful. Xavier rode close to the coach, and Delilah found herself watching him through the window, fascinated by the way he moved with his horse, by the constant alertness in his posture, by the sheer solid presence of him. She had never met anyone quite like him. The men she knew were either soft town dwellers or ranch hands who worked for her father, good men but ordinary. Xavier was something else entirely, something wild and untamed but with a core of honor that shone through his rough exterior. When they finally rolled into Bandera, the sun had set and lanterns glowed in windows. The sheriff came out when he heard about the attempted robbery, taking custody of the prisoners and listening intently to everyone's account. Cole Jennings, faced with multiple witnesses and his own wounded hand as evidence, deflated like a punctured water skin, sullenly admitting his part in the scheme. "We have been trying to catch Jennings for months," the sheriff said, shaking Xavier's hand vigorously. "You did us a great service, Lawson. The whole territory will be grateful." Xavier just nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. Delilah saw him glance toward the edge of town, toward the dark hills beyond, and she realized he was already thinking about leaving, about returning to his solitary life in the mountains. "Mr. Lawson," she said quickly, before he could disappear, "it is dark and you have ridden hard. My family's ranch is just 5 miles west. Please, stay the night at least. Let us thank you properly." He hesitated, and she could see the refusal forming. "I am not much for company." "Please," she said again, and there must have been something in her voice because his eyes met hers and held. "You saved my life and the lives of those passengers. The least we can do is offer you a hot meal and a bed." After a long moment, he nodded. One night. Victory surged through her, though she was not entirely sure why it mattered so much. She collected her belongings, thanked the driver and her fellow passengers, and arranged for a horse from the livery. Xavier waited patiently, holding the reins of his buckskin and her mount, and then they rode together out of town into the darkness. The moon was rising, painting the landscape in silver and shadow. Delilah led the way along the familiar road, acutely aware of Xavier riding beside her. The night air was cool and full of the scent of cedar and earth. Somewhere a coyote called, lonely and wild. "Have you lived in these hills long?" she asked, wanting to hear his voice again. 5 years, give or take. Came down from Colorado after the war." The war? She did the math. He would have been young when he enlisted, maybe 18 or 19. "Bus fought for the Union. Was not popular in these parts when I first arrived, but I kept to myself, and eventually folks let me be." She heard something in his voice, an old pain carefully locked away. It must be lonely, living alone in the mountains. Lonely is not always bad. People complicate things. They also make things worth living for. He glanced at her, his face unreadable in the moonlight. "You speak from experience?" "I have family. A father, 2 younger brothers. My mother died when I was 16, and I had to grow up fast, help run the ranch and raise the boys. It was hard, but I would not trade it. The love makes the hardship bearable." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the horses' hooves on the packed earth and the night insects singing in the grass. Then Xavier spoke again, his voice quieter. "Sorry about your mother. That's a hard thing for a girl to lose. Thank you. And thank you again for today. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been there. You would have managed. You have steel in you. Could see it in how you kept your head during the fight." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. They crested a rise, and she pointed ahead to where lights glowed in the distance. "There, that is home." The Norton Ranch was a sprawling operation, with a large main house, several barns, and corrals. As they rode into the yard, dogs began barking and the front door opened, spilling light. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, a rifle in his hands. "Delilah? That you, girl?" "Yes, Papa, I am home." She dismounted quickly and ran to embrace her father, who wrapped her in a bear hug that lifted her off her feet. "Thank God. We got word there were bandits on the road, and I was about to ride out looking for you." He set her down and looked past her to where Xavier sat quietly on his horse. "Who is this?" "This is Xavier Lawson. He saved my life today, Papa. The stagecoach guard was in league with bandits and tried to rob us, but Mr. Lawson rode alongside and fought them off." Her father's expression transformed. He strode forward and reached up to shake Xavier's hand with a grip that made lesser men wince. "Marcus Norton, pleased to meet you and deeply in your debt, Mr. Lawson. Please, come inside. You will stay as long as you like." Xavier dismounted, and Delilah saw her father take in the mountain man's size and bearing with an assessing eye. Marcus Norton was himself a big man, hardened by decades of ranch work, but even he had to acknowledge that Xavier was something special. A young ranch hand appeared to take the horses, and they went inside, where Delilah's two brothers, Daniel and David, both in their teens, gaped at the huge stranger with open curiosity. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had come west with the railroad and stayed, immediately began fussing over Delilah and ordering food to be brought out. Over dinner, Delilah told the whole story, while Xavier sat quietly, eating the roast beef and potatoes with the appreciation of a man who usually cooked his own simple meals. Her father listened intently, his face growing darker as she described the guard's treachery, and then brightening as she recounted Xavier's swift action. "You have a gift, Mr. Lawson," Marcus said. "Most men would have hesitated, worried about their own skin. You rode straight into danger." Xavier shrugged, uncomfortable. "Could not let harm come to innocent folks. Nevertheless, you have my deepest gratitude. If there is anything I can do to repay you, anything at all, you need only ask. No payment needed. Did what anyone would do. Anyone did not do it. You did." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying the mountain man. "How do you make your living up in those hills?" "Trap mostly. Some hunting. Sell pelts and meat in town when I need supplies. Hard way to live. Suits me." Delilah watched the exchange, seeing her father's wheels turning. She knew that look. He was plotting something. After dinner, Mrs. Chen showed Xavier to the guest room, a comfortable space with a real bed and clean linens. Delilah saw the way he looked at it, like he was not quite sure what to do with such luxury. She found it oddly endearing. "Good night, Mr. Lawson," she said from the doorway. "Thank you again for everything." He turned to face her, and in the lamplight she could see his features more clearly than she had been able to on the trail. He was handsome in a rough, untamed way, all hard edges and weathered strength. His eyes were striking, intelligent, and watchful. "Good night, Miss Norton. Glad you're home safe." She reluctantly left him and went to her own room, but sleep was elusive. She kept seeing him on his horse, moving with such confidence and deadly grace, kept remembering the way he had looked at her, really seen her in a way most men did not, and she kept thinking about how he was planning to leave in the morning, to disappear back into the mountains, and the thought made her chest ache in a way she did not fully understand. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Delilah dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Xavier already up, standing on the porch with a cup of coffee and watching the sun rise over the hills. He had his hat in his hand, and his hair was damp like he had washed at the pump. "Could not sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Not used to being indoors, too quiet." She smiled. "Most people complain the ranch is too noisy with all the animals and hands." "Different kind of noise. This is living noise. Mountains are empty noise." It was a poetic way to put it, and she found herself revising her opinion of him once again. There was depth beneath that rough exterior. Her father emerged before she could respond, fully dressed despite the early hour. "Mr. Lawson, walk with me. I want to show you something." Xavier glanced at Delilah, who shrugged. He followed Marcus down the porch steps and across the yard toward one of the barns. Delilah, curious, trailed behind at a discreet distance. Inside the barn, Marcus stopped and turned to face the mountain man. "I will be direct. I need a man like you on this ranch, someone I can trust, someone with your skills. These are dangerous times and getting more so. Cattle rustlers, bandits, disputes over water rights. I have good men, but none with your particular abilities." Xavier stiffened. "I am not a hired gun. I am not asking you to be. I am asking you to be ranch security. Help train my men in defense, ride patrol on our borders, ensure my family and hands stay safe. In return, I will pay you well, give you your own cabin on the property so you can have your privacy, and you will always have a place at our table." Delilah held her breath, waiting for Xavier's response. She was stunned by how much she wanted him to say yes. Xavier was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "That is a generous offer, Mr. Norton, but I'm not a settling kind of man. I've been on my own too long." "I understand. But consider this. Winter is coming in a few months. Those mountains get brutal cold. You could spend the winter here, warm and fed, with honest work to do. Come spring, if you want to leave, no hard feelings, but give it until then." It was masterfully done, Delilah thought. Her father was giving Xavier an easy out, while also giving him time to see if he liked it here. She saw Xavier wavering, saw the conflict in his eyes. "Why do you want me here?" Xavier asked bluntly. "You do not know me," Marcus smiled. "I know enough. You risked your life for strangers without thought of reward. You are capable and cool-headed in a crisis. And I saw how you looked at my daughter, like you would die before letting harm come to her. That is the kind of man I want watching over my family." Xavier's eyes widened slightly, and Delilah felt heat flood her cheeks. So her father had noticed the way Xavier watched her. She had thought she was imagining the intensity of his attention. "I meant no disrespect," Xavier said stiffly. "None taken. My daughter is a beautiful, capable woman. Any man with eyes would notice her. But you looked at her like she mattered, not like she was just a pretty thing. There is a difference." Xavier rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Finally, he sighed. "Until spring. Then I decide whether to stay or go." Marcus's grin was triumphant. "Fair enough. Welcome to the Norton Ranch, Xavier." They shook hands, and Delilah felt her heart give a strange little leap. Xavier was staying, at least for a while. She hurried back to the house before they could catch her eavesdropping, but she could not stop smiling. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Marcus assigned one of the empty line cabins to Xavier, a sturdy one-room structure near the edge of the property with a good stove and a comfortable bunk. Xavier moved his few possessions in and seemed content with the arrangement. During the days, he rode the ranch boundaries, getting to know the land and the men. He was quiet and kept mostly to himself, but the ranch hands quickly learned to respect him. There was an incident with a couple of rustlers trying to cut out some cattle, and Xavier handled it with calm efficiency, running them off without firing a shot, but making it very clear they would not be welcome to return. Delilah found excuses to cross paths with him, bringing him lunch when he was working near the house, asking his advice on her mare who had developed a limp, riding out to check fence lines that just happened to be near where he was patrolling. Xavier never seemed to mind her presence. If anything, he appeared to seek it out, always finding reasons to come by the main house in the evenings, accepting her father's standing dinner invitation more often than not. They talked, long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing. She learned he had grown up in Missouri, the son of a farmer who drank too much and beat his wife. Xavier had left home at 15, lied about his age to join the army, and spent 4 years fighting in a war that had shown him the worst of humanity. After the war, he had drifted west, unable to settle, unable to fit into normal society. The mountains had been his refuge, the silence a balm to his scarred soul. She told him about her own life, about growing up wild and free on the ranch, about the devastation of losing her mother to a fever, about stepping into the role of woman of the house while still grieving. She told him about her dreams of expanding the ranch, of building something lasting, and he listened with an attention that made her feel heard in a way she had never experienced before. One evening in late June, they were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the fireflies dance in the grass. Her father and brothers had gone to bed, leaving them alone in the warm darkness. Delilah was acutely aware of Xavier beside her, of the way his arm occasionally brushed hers, of the way he smelled like leather and sage and something uniquely him. "Can I ask you something personal?" she ventured. "You can ask, cannot promise I will answer. Why did you really agree to stay? I do not think it was just because of the warm cabin." He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "I have been alone a long time. Choice at first, then just habit. Did not think I wanted anything else. But that day on the coach, when I saw you standing up to danger with your chin high and fire in your eyes, something shifted. You reminded me that there are things worth fighting for beyond just survival." Her breath caught. "Xavier, I know I should not say such things. You are the boss's daughter, and I am just a hired hand. But you asked for honesty." She turned to face him fully, her heart pounding. "I'm glad you stayed. I have not been able to stop thinking about you since that day." His eyes met hers, and there was such hunger in them it made her shiver. "Delilah, I'm not a good bet. I have demons. I'm not easy to be around. I do not know if I even know how to be with another person anymore. I'm not afraid of demons, and I think you know how to be with people just fine. You just have not found people worth the effort." She reached out and took his hand. marveling at the size and strength of it, at the calluses that spoke of hard work and harder living. I like you, Xavier Lawson, more than I should, probably, but I have never been good at doing what I should. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. Slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she would bolt, he raised his other hand and cupped her cheek. His palm was warm and rough, and she leaned into it. "You are dangerous," he said softly. "You make me want things I gave up on a long time ago." "What kind of things?" "Home, family, someone to come back to at the end of the day." His thumb brushed over her cheekbone. "Someone to love." The last word hung between them, fragile and precious. Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "Those are good things to want. Not if I cannot give them to you properly, not if I am too broken." "You are not broken. You are healing. There is a difference." She turned her head and pressed a kiss to his palm, feeling him shudder. "Give yourself a chance, Xavier. Give us a chance." For a moment she thought he would pull away, retreat back into his shell of isolation, but then he leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded with enthusiasm. His beard was soft against her skin, and he tasted like the coffee they had shared after dinner. His hand slid into her hair, cradling her head, and she clutched at his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This is a bad idea." "Probably. Want to do it anyway?" A real smile broke across his face, transforming him from forbidding to almost boyish. "Yes." "Good. Me too." They sat together in the darkness, holding hands and stealing kisses, and Delilah felt happier than she had in years, maybe ever. Xavier was still cautious, still holding part of himself back, but she could be patient. She could show him that he was worth loving, that he deserved good things. Her father noticed the change between them immediately, of course. Marcus Norton did not get to be a successful rancher by being unobservant. A few days later, he called Xavier into his office. "I see you and my daughter have grown close," Marcus said without preamble. Xavier met his eyes steadily. "Yes, sir. If that is a problem, I will leave." "Did I say it was a problem?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I like you, Xavier. I think you are a good man who has had a hard road. I also think you care about Delilah genuinely, not because she is a rancher's daughter with prospects. Am I right?" "You are right. I would care about her if she did not have two coins to rub together. She is the finest woman I have ever met." Marcus nodded, satisfied. "Then you have my blessing to court her, if that is your intention. But Xavier, understand this. She has been hurt before, though she hides it well. Had a beau a few years back who turned out to be more interested in the ranch than in her. Broke her heart. So if you are not serious, if you are going to leave come spring, tell her now. Do not let her fall deeper, if you are not planning to catch her." Xavier felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. "I am serious. Maybe more serious than is wise given how little we have known each other. But I cannot seem to help it. When I am with her, the world makes sense in a way it has not since before the war." "That is how I felt about her mother," Marcus said quietly. "Like she was the missing piece I did not know I needed. If you feel that way about Delilah, then you are a lucky man. Treat her right and you will have my full support." "Thank you, sir. I will do my best not to disappoint you or her." As summer deepened into the fierce heat of July and August, Xavier and Delilah's relationship blossomed. They were not flamboyant about it, both being private people, but everyone on the ranch knew they were courting. Xavier became a fixture at the dinner table, and Delilah's brothers took to following him around, peppering him with questions about tracking and shooting and surviving in the wilderness. He was patient with them, teaching them skills their father did not have, and Delilah fell a little more in love watching him mentor the boys. She also saw the gradual changes in Xavier himself. He smiled more. He joined in conversations instead of just listening from the sidelines. He began to trust that this place, these people, were not going to hurt him or betray him. The walls around his heart were coming down brick by brick. One evening in mid-August, he took her riding to a spot high in the hills overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. They dismounted and stood at the edge of the bluff, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "I have been thinking," he said, his voice rumbling in his chest. about what comes next. Her heart beat faster. What about it? Your father wants me to stay past spring. Offered to make me a partner in the ranch eventually if I prove myself. He did? He did not tell me that. I think he wanted me to have time to consider without pressure. But Delilah, I cannot make that decision without talking to you first, because if I stay, it is not going to be as just a hired hand. It is going to be as a man who intends to build a life here, with you, if you will have me. She pulled back to look up at him, her eyes wide. Xavier, are you asking what I think you are asking? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple and beautiful, a gold band with a small emerald set in it. I am not fancy, and I'm not smooth with words. I have scars inside and out, and I'm probably going to mess things up sometimes. But I love you, Delilah Norton. I love you more than I thought I could love anything. You brought me back to life when I did not even realize I was dead inside. Will you marry me? Joy exploded through her, so intense it was almost painful. Yes, yes, Xavier, of course I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she saw that his hands were shaking slightly. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him with all the passion she had been carefully restraining, and he responded in kind, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, they were both laughing, giddy with happiness. Where did you get the ring? She asked, admiring the way the emerald caught the fading light. Made it. Took me 3 tries to get it right. The emerald, I've been carrying that for years. Found it in a stream bed in Colorado and kept it because it was beautiful. Never thought I would have anyone to give it to, but I am glad I saved it. The color matches your eyes. She was going to cry. You made this for me? Wanted it to be special. Wanted you to know I was serious. I know you are serious. You are the most serious man I have ever met. She kissed him again, softer this time, pouring all her love into it. When? When what? When do you want to get married? He looked startled, like he had not thought that far ahead. I suppose that is up to you. Women usually have ideas about these things. I do not need a big fancy wedding, just family and friends, something simple. What about October, after the heat breaks but before the cold sets in? October sounds perfect. They stayed on the bluff until the stars came out, making plans and dreaming about the future. Xavier talked about the cabin he wanted to build for them, bigger than the line shack but still cozy, positioned to catch the morning sun. Delilah talked about expanding the horse breeding operation, using Xavier's knowledge of wild mustangs to improve their bloodlines. They talked about children, both hoping for a house full of them, and about growing old together on this land they both loved. When they finally rode back to the ranch, Marcus took one look at his daughter's glowing face and Xavier's proud expression and knew immediately what had happened. He shook Xavier's hand warmly and pulled Delilah into a hug. I am happy for you both, he said sincerely. Your mother would have loved him. The next 2 months were a whirlwind of preparation. Delilah worked with Mrs. Chen to arrange the wedding while also helping Xavier build their cabin. She insisted on being involved in the construction, and he grudgingly admitted she was handy with a hammer. The cabin took shape on a pretty rise about a 1/4 mile from the main house, close enough for convenience but far enough for privacy. It had 2 large rooms downstairs, a kitchen and living area, and a sleeping loft above. Xavier built a wide porch across the front, knowing Delilah loved to sit outside in the evenings. The men on the ranch pitched in to help, and it became a community project. Everyone liked Xavier by now, respecting his skills and his quiet integrity. They were happy to see him settling down with Miss Delilah, who they had all known since she was a girl. The wedding took place on a perfect October afternoon, with the leaves just starting to turn gold on the cottonwoods along the creek. They held it outdoors, in the meadow behind the main house, with chairs set up for the guests and an arch covered in wildflowers. The local preacher officiated, and Delilah wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit. She looked like an angel, Xavier thought, walking toward him on her father's arm with joy shining from her face. His voice was steady as he spoke his vows, promising to love and cherish her for all his days, to protect and provide for her, to be the man she deserved. Her voice trembled with emotion as she made her own promises, to stand beside him through whatever came, to build a home and family together, to love him with all she had. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Xavier kissed his bride with fierce tenderness and the assembled guests erupted in cheers. It was, everyone agreed, one of the finest weddings Bandera had seen in years. The celebration continued into the evening with food and music and dancing. Xavier, who claimed he did not dance, found himself swept onto the makeshift dance floor by his new wife and discovered that with her in his arms he could manage just fine. They swayed together under the stars, lost in each other, while friends and family looked on with approval. Later, when the party was winding down, they slipped away to their new cabin. Xavier carried Delilah over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the living room. A fire was already burning in the hearth, courtesy of Marcus, and candles glowed on the mantel. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson," Xavier said, and the name made Delilah's heart swell. "Welcome home, Mr. Lawson." They came together in the candlelight, and the rest of the world fell away. Xavier made love to his wife with a reverence and passion that brought tears to her eyes, and she gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. This was what she had been waiting for all her life, she realized. This man, this moment, this perfect joining of two souls. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their marriage bed, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Xavier stroked her hair and held her close, marveling that this was real, that she was his. "Are you happy?" Delilah asked softly. "Happier than I have any right to be." "You?" "Completely." She propped herself up on his chest, looking down at his face. I love you, Xavier. I know I said it in my vows, but I want you to hear it again. I love you with everything I am." His hand came up to cup her face, his gray-green eyes suspiciously bright. "I love you too. Did not think I was capable of feeling this much, but you proved me wrong. You proved me wrong about a lot of things." "What things?" "That I was better off alone, that I did not deserve good things, that my life was over after the war." He pulled her down for a kiss. "You saved me, Delilah, just as surely as I saved you on that stagecoach. Maybe more." "We saved each other," she corrected. "That is what love does." They talked for hours, making plans for their future, before finally falling asleep in each other's arms as the fire burned down to embers. The first year of their marriage was an adventure in learning to live with another person after both had been independent for so long. They had their disagreements, usually about practical matters like how much wood to split for winter or whether to invest in new breeding stock. But they learned to compromise, to communicate, to put the relationship ahead of being right. Xavier had to learn to open up about his feelings instead of retreating into silence, and Delilah had to learn to give him space when his demons surfaced without taking it personally. Through it all, their love deepened. Xavier became an integral part of the ranch operation, his skills and judgment valued by everyone. Marcus increasingly relied on him to handle the difficult situations, and the two men developed a strong bond that went beyond employer and employee. They were family now. In the spring, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. She told Xavier one evening after dinner, unable to contain her excitement. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down gently, worried he had been too rough. She laughed at his sudden caution and reassured him she was not made of glass. "A baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby. You are going to be a father. Are you ready for that?" He thought about it seriously. "I do not know, but I know I am going to try my hardest to be a good one, better than my own father was. You are going to be wonderful. I have seen you with my brothers. You are patient and kind, and you know how to teach." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer heat. Xavier was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worried about Delilah overdoing it. She tolerated his hovering with good humor, knowing it came from love. Mrs. Chen became her ally, instructing Xavier firmly that pregnant women were not invalids and that Delilah knew her own limits. In November, on a cold, clear morning, Delilah went into labor. Xavier paced the living room of the main house like a caged mountain lion, while Mrs. Chen and the midwife attended to his wife. Every time Delilah cried out, he flinched. Marcus sat with him, calmly whittling and offering words of reassurance. "She is strong," Marcus said. "She takes after her mother. Everything will be fine." Xavier wanted to believe him, but he had seen too many things go wrong in life to take anything for granted. It was the longest day of his life. When the baby's first cry finally pierced the air, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Chen emerged, beaming. "You have a son, Xavier, a big, healthy boy, and Delilah is doing well." He practically ran to the bedroom, stopping short in the doorway at the sight of his wife propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up and smiled at him, and he had never loved her more than in that moment. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Xavier approached like he was walking on holy ground. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. The child was red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. He was perfect. "He is beautiful," Xavier breathed, just like his mother. "He has your nose, and I think he's going to be as big as you." He felt like he weighed 20 pounds. Delilah laughed tiredly and handed the baby to Xavier. "Hold him." Xavier took his son with extreme care, terrified of dropping him or holding him wrong. But the moment the baby was in his arms, something clicked into place. This was his child, his family, the future he had never dared hope for. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your papa. I promise I'm going to take care of you and your mama for as long as I live. I promise I'm going to be the father you deserve." The baby stopped crying and seemed to stare up at Xavier with unfocused eyes, and Xavier felt his heart crack wide open with love. "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything, wanting to see the baby first. Xavier thought about it. "What was your mother's father's name?" "Thomas. Thomas Blackwell. But I thought we were not using that surname." "No, but Thomas is good. Strong. Classic. Thomas Lawson. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the family." Over the next few years, their family grew. A daughter, Margaret, arrived 2 years after Thomas with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Then another son, James, came along 18 months later, completing their family. The cabin had to be expanded to accommodate everyone, with 2 more rooms added on the back and a larger kitchen. Xavier thrived as a father in a way that surprised even him. He was endlessly patient with the children, teaching them to ride and track and survive in the wild, but also reading to them at night and comforting them when they had nightmares. Delilah watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again every day. The ranch prospered under the partnership between Marcus Xavier and Delilah. They expanded their operations, adding more cattle and building up the horse breeding program. Xavier's knowledge of the land and animals proved invaluable, and his reputation for fairness and integrity meant other ranchers came to them to mediate disputes. The Norton Lawson Ranch, as it became known, was a respected operation throughout the region. Marcus, growing older, gradually handed over more responsibility to Xavier and Delilah. He was content to spend his days with his grandchildren, spoiling them and telling them stories about their mother when she was young. He lived to see Thomas turn 10, Margaret turn 8, and James turn 6 before passing peacefully in his sleep one winter night. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had built, and Xavier stood with his arm around Delilah as she wept for the father she had loved so much. "He was proud of you," Xavier told her later, holding her close. "He told me many times that you were the finest person he knew, and that I was lucky to have won your heart. I'm going to miss him so much. I know, but we will keep his legacy alive through this ranch and through our children. He will not be forgotten." Time moved on, as it always does. Xavier's hair turned gray at the temples, though he remained as strong and capable as ever. Delilah's face acquired laugh lines, evidence of years of joy. Their children grew into fine young people. Thomas, serious and hard-working, showed every sign of being a natural rancher. Margaret, spirited and intelligent, wanted to become a teacher. James, the adventurous one, talked about exploring the wider world before settling down. One evening, when Xavier was in his mid-40s and Delilah in her early 40s, they sat together on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset just as they had on the night he proposed. The children were at the main house with their grandmother, Mrs. Chen, who was herself getting on in years but still spry. "Do you ever think about that day on the stagecoach?" Delilah asked, her hand in Xavier's. "Sometimes. Seems like a lifetime ago." It was a lifetime ago. A whole life we have lived together since then. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I have never regretted it, you know. Marrying you, building this life. Not for 1 second. Neither have I. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. He kissed the top of her head. I love you, Delilah. More now than on our wedding day, if that is possible. It is possible. Love grows if you tend it properly. And we have tended ours very well. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and Xavier felt a pang of nostalgia for his old mountain life. But it was fleeting. He would not trade what he had now for anything. Xavier, Delilah said softly. Yes? Thank you for staying, for taking a chance on me, on us, on this life. He turned to look at her, this woman who had saved him in every way that mattered. Her hair had threads of silver now, and her hands showed the work of managing a ranch and raising children, but she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Thank you for seeing something worth saving in a broken mountain man, he replied. Thank you for teaching me that home is not a place but a person. You are my home, Delilah. Always have been, always will be. She smiled, and they kissed as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside the house, their children's laughter drifted through the open windows. Below, the ranch spread out in peaceful prosperity. And in that moment, Xavier Lawson knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Years continued to pass in a gentle rhythm. Thomas married a lovely young woman named Sarah and took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, building his own cabin on the property. Margaret did indeed become a teacher, opening a school in Bandera that served children from all the surrounding ranches. James traveled for a few years, saw the cities and the coastlines, before returning home and admitting that his heart belonged to the Texas hill country. He married and settled on a neighboring property, close enough to visit, but far enough to be his own man. Xavier and Delilah became grandparents, doting on the growing number of grandchildren with the same love and attention they had given their own children. Xavier taught the grandchildren to track and shoot just as he had taught their parents. Delilah told them stories and baked cookies and made sure they knew they were loved unconditionally. Mrs. Chen passed away in her sleep at the impressive age of 85, having lived to see 4 generations of the Norton Lawson family grow and thrive. They buried her beside Marcus, honoring her as the family member she had been. On a warm spring day in 1896, 20 years after the Stagecoach incident that had brought them together, Xavier and Delilah celebrated their anniversary with a family gathering. Their children and grandchildren filled the ranch house and spilled out into the yard. There was music and laughter and so much love it seemed to shimmer in the air. As the party wound down and the sun began to set, Xavier took Delilah's hand and led her away from the crowd, up to the rise where he had built their cabin all those years ago. The cabin was still standing, still home, though they had made modifications and improvements over the decades. 20 years, Delilah marveled. How did we get so lucky? Not luck, choice. Every day we chose each other, chose this life, chose love. Xavier pulled her close and they swayed together in the fading light, dancing to music only they could hear. And I would choose you again and again in every lifetime. I love you, Xavier Lawson, my mountain man, my protector, my home. I love you, Delilah Lawson, my savior, my strength, my everything. They stood together as the stars emerged, 2 souls who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful. The ranch spread out below them, a testament to hard work and love. Their family laughed and talked in the distance, carrying on the legacy they had created. And in that moment, with Delilah in his arms and the life they had built surrounding them, Xavier felt a peace so profound it brought tears to his eyes. He had come so far from the broken, isolated man who lived alone in the mountains. He had become someone he could be proud of, not because of his strength or his skills, but because of his capacity to love and be loved. The years ahead would bring challenges, as all years do. There would be droughts and economic downturns, illnesses and losses. But through it all, Xavier and Delilah would face everything together, their love the bedrock on which they built their lives. They grew old together, watching their grandchildren have children of their own. Xavier's hair turned fully white, and his movements slowed, but his eyes remained sharp, and his love for his wife never dimmed. Delilah's hands grew arthritic, making it harder to do the detailed work she loved, but her smile remained bright and her spirit strong. On a quiet evening in the winter of 1908, Xavier sat in his favorite chair by the fire, Delilah beside him with her hand in his. They were in their 60s now, old by the standards of the time, but still present and engaged with their family and the ranch. "Tell me again how we met," Delilah said, as she sometimes did when they sat together in the evenings. Xavier smiled. "You were on a stagecoach, suspicious of the guard who was supposed to protect you. You asked for help, and I happened to be there. You saved my life that day. You saved mine too. Just took me a while to realize it." He squeezed her hand gently. "Best decision I ever made was riding alongside that coach. Best thing I ever did was stay. Best thing I ever did was ask you to." They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling, the wind whistling softly outside. In the next room, their grandson was reading to his little sister, their voices a soft murmur. The ranch was quiet, settled down for the night, safe and secure. Xavier looked at his wife, at the woman who had given him everything worth having, and felt gratitude so intense it was almost overwhelming. Life had not been easy, but it had been good. So very good. Years later, when historians wrote about the development of Texas in the late 19th century, they would mention the Norton-Lawson Ranch as an example of successful family ranching operations. They would note the innovations in cattle breeding and land management, the role the ranch played in the local economy, and the family's reputation for integrity and fairness. But they would not know the real story, the human story of a broken mountain man and a determined young woman who found each other against impossible odds. They would not know about the stagecoach guard who could not be trusted, or the mountain man who rode beside the coach until she was safe home. They would not know about the love that bloomed in the wild Texas hills, a love so strong it built a legacy that lasted generations. That story belonged to Xavier and Delilah, to their children and grandchildren, to everyone who had been touched by their example of what love could accomplish when two people committed fully to each other and to building something meaningful. Xavier passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, with Delilah beside him holding his hand. His last words were, "I love you. Thank you for everything." Delilah lived for 5 more years, surrounded by family, tending the ranch and the legacy they had built together. She told stories about Xavier to anyone who would listen, ensuring that her grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew what kind of man he had been. When her time came, she went with a smile on her face, knowing she would be with him again. They were buried side by side on the hill overlooking the ranch, next to Marcus and Mrs. Chen. The stone was simple. Xavier Lawson, 1848-1920, and Delilah Norton Lawson, 1854-1925, beloved parents and grandparents, together forever. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story while honoring those who came before. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, people claimed they could see 2 figures standing on the hill, an impossibly large man and a woman with her head on his shoulder, watching over the land they loved. Love stories, real love stories, do not always start with love at first sight or dramatic declarations. Sometimes they start with a woman who needs help and a man who happens to be in the right place at the right time. Sometimes they start with trust given and earned, with quiet conversations and shared dreams. Sometimes they start with a mountain man riding beside a stagecoach, protecting a passenger he does not even know yet, not realizing that she will become his whole world. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, those love stories last not just a lifetime but for eternity, echoing through the generations, reminding us all that love is the most powerful force in the universe. It can heal the wounded, give purpose to the lost, and turn strangers into family. It can build ranches and raise children and create legacies that outlast us all. Xavier and Delilah's story was one such love story. It began with danger and uncertainty, grew through trust and companionship, bloomed into passion and commitment, and matured into the kind of deep, abiding love that defines a life well lived. They faced challenges and overcame them together. They built something beautiful out of hard work and determination. They loved fiercely and completely, holding nothing back. Their descendants would tell the story for generations, how a mountain man saved a woman on a stagecoach and ended up saving himself in the process. How two people from completely different worlds found common ground and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. How love, real and true and lasting, could transform everything. The Texas sun rose and set over the Norton Lawson ranch, day after day, year after year, century after century. The family thrived, adapting to changing times while holding on to the core values that Xavier and Delilah had established: hard work, integrity, family, and love above all else. The ranch itself became a landmark, a piece of Texas history, a reminder of the pioneers who had tamed this wild country and made it home. But the real legacy was not the land or the buildings or even the family name. The real legacy was the love story that started it all, the proof that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, when we take a chance on someone who seems different, or when we let someone pass the walls we have built around our hearts. Xavier had been a man without a home, wandering alone in the mountains, convinced he was better off in solitude. Delilah had been a woman trying to hold her family together after loss, strong and capable but lonely in her own way. Together, they created something neither could have imagined alone: a partnership, a family, a legacy of love that would echo through time. On quiet evenings when the ranch was peaceful and the stars filled the Texas sky, you could almost hear it if you listened carefully. The sound of a man's deep voice and a woman's gentle laughter, the creak of a porch swing, the soft murmur of two people who loved each other more than life itself. Xavier and Delilah might be gone, but their love remained, woven into the very fabric of the land they called home. And that, in the end, is what matters most. Not the adventures or the challenges or even the victories, but the love we build and share, the connections we forge, the lives we touch. Xavier and Delilah understood that. They lived it every single day of their time together. Their story began with a stagecoach and a mountain man who could not let harm come to an innocent woman. It ended with two souls so intertwined that not even death could separate them. In between was a lifetime of love, laughter, tears, triumph, and the kind of everyday magic that happens when two people choose each other again and again and again. The Wild West was a hard place, unforgiving and dangerous. But it was also a place where love could bloom against all odds, where a broken man could find healing and a strong woman could find partnership, where a chance meeting could change the course of two lives forever. Xavier and Delilah's love story was not just their own. It belonged to everyone who heard it, everyone who needed to believe that love was possible, that second chances were real, that broken things could be mended, and lonely people could find home. Their story was a gift, a reminder that the best adventures are the ones we share with someone we love, and that the greatest courage is not fighting external enemies, but opening our hearts to let someone in. The sun set over the Norton Lawson ranch one final time in this story, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The land lay peaceful and prosperous, a testament to generations of hard work and love. Somewhere in the main house, great-great-grandchildren played and laughed, carrying on the legacy without even knowing how precious it was. And on the hill, the stones stood silent, witness to a love that transcended time itself. Xavier had ridden beside that stagecoach to protect a stranger. He had stayed to build a life with the woman who became his everything. And in doing so, he had found not just love, but redemption, purpose, and a reason to believe in goodness again. Delilah had taken a chance on a rough mountain man who seemed like an unlikely partner. She had seen past the hard exterior to the good heart beneath, and in doing so, she had found not just love, but an equal, a partner, someone who would stand beside her through everything life brought. Together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone. Not just a ranch or a family, but a legacy of love that would inspire everyone who heard their story. They had shown that love was not about perfection, but about commitment, not about easy answers, but about facing challenges together, not about losing yourself, but about finding the person you were meant to become. The Stagecoach guard could not be trusted. The mountain man rode beside the coach until she was safe home, and in the process, two souls found each other and created a love that would last forever. That was the story. That was the truth. That was the legacy of Xavier and Delilah Lawson, two people who proved that love, real love, could conquer anything. Their story ended not with tragedy, but with triumph, not with separation, but with a lifetime together and an eternity beyond. They lived fully and loved completely, and they left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask for? The wild Texas wind blew across the ranch, carrying with it the whispers of the past and the promise of the future. Somewhere in that wind was the echo of a woman's laughter and a man's deep voice, forever intertwined, forever home. The story of the Stagecoach guard and the mountain man had come to its close, but the love it celebrated would go on forever. A light in the darkness, a reminder that no matter how lost or broken we might feel, there's always hope for love, for redemption, for home. And so they lived, and so they loved, and so they remained, forever together in the land they had claimed and the hearts of everyone who knew their story. The end of one journey and the beginning of an eternal one, where love never dies, and home is wherever your heart finds peace. Xavier and Delilah Lawson, mountain man and rancher's daughter, protector and protected, two souls united by chance and bound together by choice, living proof that the greatest adventure of all is learning to love and be loved in return.